From the Ticats Audio Network, this is a Ticats This Week, built by Turkstra. Whatever your next home project is, build it better with Turkstra. Visit TurkstraLumber.com today.
Game 4 for the Tiger Cats coming up on Sunday when they visit the Ottawa Redblacks, an 0-3 start. I'm RJ Broadhead, voice of the Ticats, along with Luke Tasker, Mike Daly, and Steve Milton. Guys, who's got all the answers? Who's got the answer right now to get the Tiger Cats winning? Raise your hand. Uh-oh.
I was expecting Steve's hand to go up.
Well,
you had it for sure.
If I had my hands up, I've got questions for sure. And
Yes.
we all have questions. So
Yeah, but if you go back to the past two seasons, in 2022, Tiger Cats started 0-4. Their first win of the season came against Ottawa. 2023, they started 0-3. Their first win of the season came against Ottawa. So it appears the Red Blacks are the cure to the Tiger Cats' slow starts, although those previous two were at Tim Hortons Field. This one will be in Ottawa. An 0-3 start, playing your first East Division team. All of a sudden, does that put a lot more importance on a victory when you look at the standings? An Ottawa win, and now they're 2 victories ahead of the Tiger Cats. But if the Tiger Cats win, they're tied with Ottawa for that final playoff spot in the East Division, and all seems right again. What do you think, Mike? Is there even more pressure now to get a victory and not let Ottawa get any further ahead?
Yeah, we always talk about, no pressure right now until you hear the Labor Day comment, right? No pressure until,
Does anybody like
0-6,
that
you can
season
still,
doesn't start
no.
till Labor Day?
No, nobody likes it. But the idea is internally, and I remember being in some of these situations, and Luke, our veteran of the losing records, as we learned from the broadcast last game.
Yes.
You get into the situation where you can reason with yourself with these losses against West opponents, because realistically, it just matters where you land in the East. And all of these seasons prior to this one, it seems like it's come down to the end of the year against the East. It's 500 records fighting to get in for a playoff spot. So it's been manageable at this point. But right now, the way the East is looking, which is completely different than previous years, these games are very, very important early on because Montreal keeps winning. Toronto's looking pretty good. And Ottawa, RJ, you said that the wins had come off Ottawa the past 2 years, but they're not the same team this year. It's a completely different team with this Ottawa team. So there's a little pressure after this one. You can't reason with a loss against Ottawa like you can with the West teams.
I think you've got to watch a couple of things on that. And a lot of it will come from people outside, like me, but you can't do this too often. If you play with fire too often, you're going to get burned. And it's the same thing as falling behind 17-0. You can make a comeback a few times. Obviously, Saskatchewan did that the previous week, and we've seen that a couple of times. But you do that too often, and it's something that Scott Milanovich talked about the other day. The yardsticks get too far ahead of you at some point. It's a bit like basketball. Maybe you can come back, but there could be times that you don't. I mean, you guys both played in what year was that, in 18? Was that 2018 when he was 0-7, 0-8 or something,
Yeah,
and almost
17,
came back.
2017,
Almost came back. And the other thing I'll say about this is that last year they made the playoffs because of Ottawa, solely because of the games against Ottawa. They don't make the playoffs without the games they had against Ottawa last year, because they were with a combined 0-6 or something against the top two teams in the East. And you're right, the East is stronger now, and you just cannot let it get away from you, or you're really counting on one thing. Well, two things really. You're counting on a chance at a crossover, which is I don't think ever happened east to west. And you don't want to do that. And that makes those Western games a little more important, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
The coming up Western games, I mean, and particularly against Edmonton.
Yeah, and you're right, against Ottawa. Tiger Cats did make some hay last season against them, but they did beat every team in the West Division. We're 5-3 against the West as well, so they had some success. Haven't had early success against the West Division. What are your thoughts on this game, Luke? Going into Ottawa, I know you love to talk about must wins. It might be a little early though. Week 4 might be a little early.
Who said I like to talk about that?
Yeah, I maybe got that backwards.
No, RJ's historically been the must-win guy. But no, we're not. I guess we're not quite there yet. But what sticks out in my mind is that it has been 2 losses, both to Sask, right? 3 losses total, 2 of them to Sask, I should say. And I got to give credit to the Rough Riders where they've earned it, because they do look good to me. Their defense looks tough. And they played those games very well, and they've gotten better over the course of 3 games. And so, the Ticats have only faced 2 opponents so far. They played Calgary pretty well, made it a good game, but chock full of mistakes. And then they sort of had a good game and a bad game with Sask. So, I think that there's still some things just to be learned about this team as well. And the 0-3 is just the reality of it, but unfortunate. I feel like there's been so many seasons as a player and as an analyst with the Ticats Audio Network that it's like a tough start, but like, just if 1 or 2 things could be different, it would, they'd be 500, or they'd have a winning record. And it's rarely just like, just so obviously the losing team and no chance at having won in any of those games. And it's just a couple things need to start falling for them. So Ottawa or whoever else, but Ottawa's their next best chance to start getting some things right.
Well, and Luke, it's
definitely
funny you say that though, Luke, because it's one of these things that at the end of the season, we could look at this and say, wow, Sask is running the table. They are a different team completely. What bothers me, and going back and watching that game in Saskatchewan for a second time, is there was just so many opportunities. And RJ, I hate to keep bringing it up, but you are absolutely right with that onside kick, in the sense that when Patterson was in there was a massive opportunity. He struggled mightily. That entire second half struggled mightily. And that was that, kind of the boost that Saskatchewan needed, was getting the ball at the 35 after that onside. I just feel there was so many opportunities for that defense to make a play, to do something against Patterson in there. And even if Saskatchewan down the road does become CFL favorite, whatever top of the league it is, there was that chance to take that game from them. And it just frustrates me going back and watching that a second time. But RJ, yep, you're right, buddy.
Well, isn't it frustrating to you guys as players too that that's a second onside kick with exactly the same problem, not going far enough?
Yeah.
And
Well, they figured it out the next time.
They figured it out the next time. They got the ball up and then let the jump ball go to the guy that can win jump balls.
I just want to say about that onside kick, I like it. I think I like the move by Scott Milanovich. He can't control the execution. That ball has to go 10 yards. The reason why they got to the 35 is because the Tiger Cats touched the ball before it went 10 yards and then got penalized. That marched them down. Had it been kicked 10 yards, even if the Riders got the football, they're still fairly close to midfield. In the way Patterson was going, like you said, Mike, there was a good chance the defense could have stopped them and gotten the ball back. So it was just kind of a perfect storm of errors after that decision was made. And then it looks like a bad decision. But personally, I like to see a head coach taking some chances and,
no problem
and going for it in third down. You agree, Steve?
With that. Yeah, no problem with that. I actually have no problem with that. And it shows, for one thing, players can, maybe you guys can comment on this, but it shows faith. Right? I mean, show faith, even though it's not necessarily going your way. And that was a big thing, like not taking advantage. You could see that on the other side of the ball. You could see after he got that short yardage touchdown a little later, what that meant and how insane they went. Those players went. Now, admittedly, they knew they just basically put the game away, but it was something like they knew they dodged a bullet. They didn't have their guy. And that guy had just eaten them up for how many points in 3 quarters, like the last quarter last week and the first 2 quarters of this week. And they didn't have him, and they knew they weren't going to have him. They knew before we did that they weren't going to have him. And the relief and sort of ecstasy on their faces was they knew they dodged some kind of potential bullet there.
If you missed the game, Rough Riders beat the Tiger Cats 36-20. Rough Riders jumped out to an 18-0 lead. Tiger Cats had a chance to maybe get it to within 3. They were on the Rough Rider 5-yard line, And had they got a touchdown and a 2-point conversion, they would have been within a field goal, and they would have had a ton of momentum, but it got switched. Bo Levi Mitchell was hit, fumbled the ball, Riders got it, and then they got all the momentum, and you kind of felt the game slipping at that point. And turnovers turned out to be a huge factor. Mike, you talked about it in your keys to the game that I know you joked in the postgame you weren't going to talk about it again because it was so lopsided. 5 turnovers for the Tiger Cats after having 1 in each of their first 2 games. And Tiger Cats did get their first takeaway, but it really didn't turn into any points for the Tiger Cats. So Riders had 17 points off turnovers, and they won by 16 points. Is this just, like you said, Luke, a really good Rough Riders defense, or are you seeing some alarming things on the offensive side of the ball? And I guess there was opening kickoff was fumbled too, so that's a terrible start.
Yeah, that special teams turnover is hugely costly. I mean, that's a crusher, and not all turnovers are created equal, and that's one that's extra costly. Yes, they get the ball immediately in scoring territory, but you even if your offense doesn't produce, you're losing the opportunity to gain 40, 45 yards in a punt situation, right? So that's an incredibly costly mistake. Bo Levi Mitchell's fumble, you're taking away points that you already earned. With that drive, you've already given yourself by that time a very easy field goal, or really a very likely touchdown possibility. So you're taking points directly off of the scoreboard with that turnover. And on it goes. Miscommunications downfield with Bo and some of the receivers, and so bopped, tipped balls for interceptions, also backed up in your own end. They're all damaging, and some more than others, but you gotta. Yeah, you can look at it from the mistakes of the offense or the special teams that turns the ball over, but a good defense is opportunistic as well, right? They're going to have a higher, if you look across a game of all the tackles, let's say there's 60 defensive plays for a team, how many times is somebody bringing a hatchet and giving themselves a higher probability chance of forcing a fumble? I'll bet you good defenses are doing it more so than bad defenses. It's better technique, it's better habits. And RJ, you and I talked about this, and Mike, actually in last week's podcast, you mentioned this as well, is just, guys having a nose for the ball. It's one thing to, on paper, be doing kind of what you're supposed to do in that defense. If you throw out a defense, a 3 double cut, let's say, good passing preventative defense here. You've got low zones filled up. You've got 3 guys deep. Okay, if you're standing in the right part of your field, you got the alignment part of it right. And if you sort of if your eyes travel the way they should in a play, and you're watching the keys on your side of the field, and you sort of move correctly, okay, you're sort of executing and operating that the right way. In a sense, you're doing the job of that defensive position. But those good defenses are filled up with guys who know when to take the risk at the right time, where they can trust themselves to extend out to make the interception instead of just breaking up the pass at the right time, because those are game-changing moments. But if a guy goes out there and breaks up the pass, good play. That actually looks good in your stats even. Not only is it a good play, it's like actually praiseworthy. We keep track of who has the most pass breakups in the league. But the real guys, it takes a real ability to say, I'm going to risk not being able to tackle this guy if I miss the breakup, because I'm going to trust myself to get the interception and go with 2 hands to the ball. It's hard to even measure that. It's hard to even know when you're seeing it or not seeing it, but the guys in the locker room know, and the guys who are doing it can feel that. And there's just a last minute risk reward or split second decisions that go beyond just doing your job or being in the right place. And so Sask has guys doing it. The East has teams winning, and it comes down to thousands of those little decisions. And I think we're gonna have to see some Ticat, and we're talking defense right now. We're gonna have to see some Ticat defenders, make more split second decisions like that. It's what makes a great player.
There's some numbers there that are a bit disturbing, and I'll ask Mike. Mike's opinion on this, because this is mine. Kyle Wilson had 10 tackles in the last game, so. What you expect from a middle linebacker to have a great number, that's quite a few. But put that aside, he leads the team in defensive tackles at 20. But the next 3 guys are all defensive backs. and there's a sort of a good and a bad to that, and that tells me that maybe they're laying. So I think 17 for Kenneth George, 14 for Lawson, 10 for Katsantonis. The next three guys on tackles, where Kyle had 20, and that would have meant before that game or partway through that game, the defensive backs were leading in tackles, and that's not always a good thing because it tells you that maybe you're either too far off the ball or you're not taking the chances that Lucas mentioned here. It's supposed to be a bit of a ball hawking thing if you've got the rush, and that hasn't happened other than a couple of times in my mind. And those stats show it.
Yeah, and a little bit of background knowledge on that too, Steve, is that the CFL is we'll say this all the time. It's a copycat league. Every team is doing similar things, and a big trend right now is bringing receivers into the run game, into the box to block like an offensive lineman. You'll see it, and it's very obvious to see on TV, and if you're watching the game, when it's a run play and when it's a pass play, because when it's a run play, those receivers are spread out and they're timing up their spacing, they're timing up their waggles to be running at full speed. When it's a run, they are so close to the box and they are all standing beside the offensive lineman, blocking linebackers, blocking ends to force these DBs to make tackles. And they are, but the problem right now with the Ticats is there's just too many mental mistakes that are going on the defensive side. Not only in the run game, where you'll see a couple big runs end up breaking out, and there's still mistakes being made on the linebacking side. I think the D-line's playing unbelievably right now, to be honest, for the most part. But there's a little bit of mistakes on the linebacker side, but a lot of mistakes on that back end in terms of tracking receivers. It's just, when there is a run game, you are responsible for a receiver as a defensive back, and wherever they go, that's where you have to fit and then become a linebacker and make that tackle. And right now, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with these receivers moving back and forth, and because the Ticats secondary hasn't worked together for a very long period of time, there's still miscommunications on that side, and that's trickling out into the pass game as well, where it's not necessarily that they're playing too far off, Steve, and they are in some situations with zones, but they're just not executing. Early on, when Trevor Harris was in, they were not winning any of their one-on-one reps.
No.
With a player like Trevor Harris, if you give him a zone, he'll find those holes in the zone after a while. He'll be smart enough to check it down to A.J. Ouellette. We saw him swing out a couple times in second and long and get first downs. He's quick with those decisions. So when you play man, you need to win against those receivers, because then it doesn't matter what quarterback's throwing the ball. If you're winning those reps, then you're able to stop those plays. And in that first half, there wasn't very many wins that we saw from the defensive back crew when they were in man-to-man. I think there's only a select few, like Luke was saying, that are taking these chances, but that's just still because they're new, right? And I know we talk about, okay, they have 3 games under their belt. Guys, it takes like a year to figure out the game of the CFL and how to play that game, right? If a receiver's behind you and a receiver's in front of you, how can I cover the receiver behind me for 2 steps and then already be jumping the guy that's running a drag route before the quarterback even throws the ball, right? Okay, if they run an out in front of me, well, then that means there's another out coming over here and I can make that play. There's just too many new guys in that back end and that linebacking core to make those type of plays right now, and you're only seeing it happen from a few people.
Mike, we got to expedite this process. We can't go a whole year.
Well, I know that was a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's slow steps, right? And as of right now, it's 3 games in, and the problem is you're playing Trevor Harris, who seems like, until he got hurt, at the top of his game. So it's maybe drinking from a fire hose for these guys as of right now. It's tough.
I think it does take at least half a season sometimes. When the good, really good defensive backfields that you were part of that were new, Mike, and when you look at Saskatchewan's a few years back when they had the really good one, and BC, they didn't really get their act together, when they were new until the second half of the season. Some of them, Saskatchewan's the one I'm thinking about, did take till the next year, but once they did, a whole different ballgame.
And let's be fair here. It's not completely on the defensive back crew. There's a lot of things going on with the newer linebackers as well in those pass drops. When you see a running back catching the swing for first downs, more times than not, unless it's a zone, the linebacker's generally responsible for that running back. Yeah. So it's kind of a whole thing right now that needs to be cleaned up and addressed.
Yeah, in a hurry. I get the chemistry together, but these guys aren't new to football. Like, it has to... You can't go many more games with giving up an average of close to 34 points a game.
You're right.
It is so for any young American. There's the transition period between the two styles of games, right? And really, for defensively, Mike, there's a little bit of this on offense, but I think even more so on defense. It's the space that's different. You have an extra guy out there, of course, but it's like the timing. The ball flight to the field side of a deep throw in the CFL. I don't mean a deep throw like a go route, I'm not talking about a 9 down the sidelines, just like an out route or a comeback to the field side. The ball flight there and how long the ball takes to get from the quarterback to a 14-yard comeback. That throw doesn't exist in American football. The whole thing is shrunken down, and the hashes have shrunk, so that's become a little bit less true. But that's one example of how a defensive back has to learn how to cheat things in order to be able to, because he knows he has the ball time to make up space. So it's like, yes, it is football and it's the same, but there's enough nuance there that it only takes if you make one mistake at the wrong time in a football game, you get a touchdown gets scored on you, right? So there's enough of them there to show up in a game, even though, these guys have been football players since they were 4 years old, but it's the communication and the working together and the nuances of those differences that I think you still see. And I remember being in like my third training camp feeling like, wow, I really get what I'm doing now. And it's like I had already scored touchdowns. I had already played in playoff games. It was my second contract. And I remember having a feeling like, okay, I kind of see what I didn't know before. And I kind of am getting a little bit better now. It's what I said last week about Keandre Smith. Like I'm noticing him do different things on the field. Not that he wasn't there, not that, it's just he's stayed on an upward path of just, getting better, and that's what you got to do. But it unfortunately takes time.
I want to follow up on what Steve said. If DBs are playing a little further off the ball, giving the receiver a little extra room, Luke, as a receiver, what would go through your mind if you saw that?
Firstly, I liked it. If you have to interact with the DB very early in your route, even if you win that exchange, like you have a very clean release, or sometimes even somebody's lining up over you, but you can't verify if it's man or zone until the play starts. And there's sometimes where you never verify that because of whatever your route, or because the play is such that what you were doing in that play, you actually could never even tell if it was man or zone because the zone sort of turned into a man or vice versa. So there's weird things that happen, but no matter what, if I'm interacting with a DB very early in my route, it's going to be different. It's not the play on paper anymore. I got to do something that breaks the sort of like, the 101 of whatever that play is. If I had a wrap on the will, but the will was going to touch me first, I knew I could even win. I could even do the exact right thing. Bat his hand down with my hand or dip my shoulder under him. And in a sense, like perfect coaching tape. That's how you get around a will linebacker. It still is different than just on paper. And I know that Jeremiah or Zach or Dane, whoever the quarterback was at the time, was going to have to allow me that time to do whatever I had to do and then be in a little bit of a different space than if that will didn't touch me. So it's another layer of decision making baked into that play for the wide receiver. Whereas I felt if a team was just going to drop back into their cover 4, okay, a four weak Sam, and I know that I have a low will linebacker, but he's going to drop to his spot, and he's kind of got his eyes to the inside of the field, and he's not really looking at me. He's not really going to like mess with me or do anything. First of all, I know it's zone because nobody's right in front of me and looking at me. And I know that I just kind of am just running the play like almost like it's on paper. I'm like running my technique like almost like it's on air, and it works I just knew we were going to move the ball down the field there. Mike would speak to maybe there's times where defenses are doing that on purpose or for better, but it was always much more of a challenge offensively if you're playing a team that is going to be uptight or getting hands on you early in a route.
Yeah, and look, I love that you're saying that. So here we go, because we're talking some serious football stuff now, so I get a little excited with it. But I like where you're going with this, because it's okay, then why don't the DBs just press every time?
Yeah,
right?
That's
If
a great
Luke's saying-
follow-up question. You're right.
Right? If Luke's saying this, why don't the DBs press every time? And it's one of these things, these coaches that are here, right? Mark Washington has been around a long time. He could call press man all game long. You wouldn't have to learn anything. There would be no nuances to the CFL other than maybe you have to run a little bit longer chasing a receiver. But you're not developing these players so that down the line, other smart offensive coordinators that are playing against you, as we saw in Saskatchewan, they were running pick routes where if you're in man and you're in press, they're going to see that on the sideline and say, okay, we're going to run these guys through about 7 receivers that you have to try to fight your way through. And if you can't fight your way through that, a 4-yard catch might turn into a 25-yard catch or a touchdown. So it's like a high risk, high reward play, but then you're also not developing these players. And Mark Washington understands that this is a long season. So he's talked about it before. He's putting all of these different coverages in, and you see it's all varying blitzes. It's all varying coverages, all varying personnel groups that he's showing on defense. And that's going to develop these players for down the road, because the easiest thing to do is for him to say, okay, let's play man, and if somebody can't cover, let's cut them and get somebody else new in, right? But if we're focusing on the whole game plan and trying to expand this defense, then let's put everything in first, let people experience and learn it, and then we'll go from there. The difference between playing man in a zone is when you have a lot of experienced players, in zone, you can steal a lot of routes. You can steal a lot of plays. You have opportunities for these defensive backs and these linebackers. Like, I think back to like a Rico Murray, Simone Lawrence, right? Like these type of players understood football enough that those guys would love to stand back at 8, 9, 10 yards and say, oh, I see what's happening in front of me. I know you want to go here with the ball, so I'll take this away, and then I'll go steal that one and get an interception. If you're just playing man-to-man and press, you're running around with your head cut off just trying to chase a guy.
Rico was great at stealing stuff. He could just sit back, kind of let it happen, and then steal it from up on top. He was great, as was Simone. I actually think Richard Leonard is good at it. You see Richard Leonard do some really smart things sometimes, and so you hope that sort of wears off into the rest of this defensive backfield.
Stavros too. Stavros had a lot of opportunities last game, and he's another person that I would say, hey, Stavros, don't ever press. Sit off and watch what's going on, and then you'll have an opportunity.
Well, we shouldn't talk about smart defensive backs and guys who could steal plays without bringing up the name of Mike Daly, the ultimate quarterback killer who could just sit back and watch the receivers. Like, I remember the times where I was like, I'd be in practice, I was 5 yards into a route, and in my head I'm just thinking, Mike already knows what I'm running right now. It pisses me off so bad. I know that he already knows what I'm doing. Or sometimes he'd be like, Luke, I know what you're doing. I'm like, shut up. Like, I can't, there's nothing I can do about it. Everyone else I can run a route on, but for some reason Mike knows what route I'm running. I don't know.
But it couldn't be more true, Luke, because my first year my head was spinning around in circles. My second year,
there you go.
You're right. It takes some time to develop that stuff. Early on, things just, they look like this. If you can't see me, I'm just waving my hands in front of my face because it's
fog of war. Yeah,
things are happening so fast.
All of the things that you guys are saying here, can't this be? I mean, I think it needs some help, and I might object to saying that maybe the defensive line's playing great. I'm not sure that they're getting enough pressure at the right times to allow some of the things that need to happen in that defensive backfield to happen. That's the feeling from where I sit, and it's a really easy game from where I sit 300 feet away from the action.
See, I would, Stephen, I'll argue that point with you a little bit.
Great.
I think, Trevor Harris in that first half, I'm talking about that first half of that last game right now.
Yeah.
And Trevor Harris was getting the ball out of his hands
soon as he got it. Yeah.
As soon as he got it. If they were a man, they were running pick routes, and that ball was out of his hands immediately. The D-line didn't have any opportunity to get to Trevor Harris. The time we saw that happen was in the first half of the first Saskatchewan game, where it seemed like Trevor Harris had to, and you see it, the quarterback will drop back, and it almost looks like a pump fake, but it's not, because he'll be like, okay, I want to throw it here, and then somebody will take away, or it won't be what he thought, and then sack, right? And then he's getting hit by the defensive line.
What's the antidote? What's the antidote to that, Mike? You can't just accept that.
No, you gotta win your reps as the back end. You gotta win your reps as a DB. You gotta start jumping things as a linebacker to make and to be fair,
Go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, Luke. And to be fair, as soon as Patterson got in the game, that defensive line was
changed
all
around.
over him.
Yeah.
All over him. And those DBs were winning routes against the receivers in man-to-man.
RJ and I were talking about this. I can't remember if it was during the broadcast or in between, at a break or whatever. Because we always have conversations. There's not enough time in the broadcast for RJ and I to get into a podcast format like this. But what are you going to do? So you've got every defensive coordinator, or it's just the chess match of football. You only have got the amount of guys you've got. So if you're going to bring your four, a couple times a game, they've got to pressure. You hope that they're going to get to the quarterback a couple times a game. But if you want that even more so, you're going to add a couple guys, right? So you're going to bring 5 or 6, or bringing 7 is sort of the full, blitz of the CFL, a cover 0 that would be. So you're going to do that. And each time you do that, you're stealing a guy away from something else, the secondary or the under coverage. If it's like a zone blitz, you're going to steal one out of the under coverage, or you're going to put them in man, and you're stealing people out of your secondary. So you're hoping that rush gets there. And the worst thing that can happen to a defensive coordinator is if the purpose of that play doesn't work. So if you bring 7 and the quarterback is protected, that's how touchdowns happen. Because if somehow they are able to do it and they're able to stop 7, or guy falls down, that happens too. So something happens where 7 doesn't, not even 7 doesn't work, and the quarterback really has a time to not even just pre-snap pick somebody and go to it, because that's usually the cover 0 answer. Quarterback already knows where he wants to go if it's cover 0. But if the quarterback has a time to let routes develop, that's a touchdown, because even a 7-man blitz didn't work. The inverse is also true. You say, okay, well, let's just send 3 and do what's called drop. We're going to do a drop 9, and so you only bring in 3, and the secondary is loaded up with defensive players. If the quarterback, who's now going to have more time, if he's able to sit back there with his time and receivers are able to win, even though the secondary is loaded up with guys, well, a defensive coordinator is banging his head off of his clipboard, because he's like, well, I'm okay losing if the quarterback has to escape the pocket and run for a first down, or is able to escape out of that 3-man rush, because, well, that was our weakness. But if he throws into an undercoverage that's loaded with guys and he gets the first down, then now I'm like, well, I don't know exactly what to do as a D coordinator. And so if we take this back to the Ticats, I'm seeing during this game in Sask, I'm seeing pressed man where the quarterback has a little bit of time, or ends up having enough time to let routes develop, and he's able to find his matchup and pick them. So the coverage didn't win, the rush didn't win. Then we're seeing times where nice zone shell back there, but again, the quarterback has enough time, the rush didn't get there, and that all starts to break down eventually. And so I almost feel like, and I would love to see what Mark Washington's response to this would be, but I almost feel like that we see Mark Washington and his defense trying different things. Like, you're not just saying like, hey, your only tool is a hammer, so you just got to keep on swinging and hope for the best. I almost see some creativity, and Mike, you'd know better than me, but as I'm watching, I'm like, there's a blitz, there's a cover 0, there's some man, there's some zone. And Trevor Harris is finding an answer each time. And of course that's kind of in that first 18-point stretch of the game. But beyond that, things got a little strange after Trevor Harris's injury. But I don't know if I guess what my point is that if you had to point to me and say coaching, like strategy or execution on the field, I'm with execution on the field defensively, and just these young guys just being able to continue their education and start taking risks where it's appropriate, and being solid in their sort of fundamental concepts.
Yeah, Luke, That's exactly it. It's execution. That's what I'm seeing as well. One of my favorite sayings that Coach O had when he was a coordinator was like, it would be a long drive, right? And let's say we'd have a timeout or an injury break, and you see a couple people walk over to Coach O, and you don't know what they're talking about, and usually they don't talk about anything. They're just going to talk about what next play is going to call instead of signaling it, and you're just saying it to the player that's right beside you. But he would always say, "Hey, if I had the magic play call, I would have called it already. So players, you got to figure something out because I don't have anything left to call." So it is execution. It's always execution, Luke. If the defense did everything correctly on every single play call, then it would work out.
I will say, offensively, sometimes there's a magic play. Every now and again, it's actually like Sask at home, that flea flicker thing that they ran after the fumble that got overturned. James Butler fumbles it. The guy recovers it with no helmet on because you can't do that. So it's Ticat first down, and immediately Milanovic calls that like double flea flicker thing. That's like the magic play that's like highlighted on the call sheet. And then some weeks you don't really have something like that, but that's a fun part of the game too when you do have a little magic.
A lot of these statistics for the Hamilton defense are based on 2 games against Saskatchewan. And you said it, Mike, Trevor Harris gets rid of that football fast. He knows he's not a super mobile quarterback. That's part of his game plan. Pretty good offensive line. So we'll see this week if the Tiger Cats can get some pressure on Drew Brown of Ottawa, young quarterback as far as a starter goes. And maybe things are a little different statistically, but going back to what you said earlier, Luke, Saskatchewan's a really good football team, and they seem to be firing on all cylinders early on. Tim White. I'm going to be the first to say that I'm not concerned about Tim White. There's clearly some frustration. Didn't have a catch in the last game. That's only the 3rd time in his career that's happened. The other 2 times were last year, including the East semifinal against Montreal. But the Alouettes, you could see their game plan on defense. Take the leading receiver in the league out of it and have someone else beat us. So it's pretty rare that Tim White does not have a reception. I feel he's setting himself up for just a miraculous final 15 games of the season where everybody's kind of counted him out in the big contract, and then he'll emerge. I'm not worried about Tim White. Steve, what about you?
Worry wouldn't be the right word. I think there has to be a level of concern. I don't know how high that level is because it hasn't happened to him very often. He's had couple of little rough stretches before, and I think things can weigh on his mind, and I think it's one of those things where do you talk to him or do you not talk to him, or do you do both? You talk to him at the right time. I think everybody, you could see it, everybody's coming up and supporting him. And one thing he is doing is, and I think you were right, RJ, in your analysis there, that they aren't going to let Bo Levi Mitchell to Tim White be the thing that beats them. That's what I think both teams that they've played so far have tried to do. That has, in turn, opened up some other things, certainly for Bridges. And had there not been some miscommunication, I think, to Bridges on one, Dunbar on another, where I think they both broke the wrong way, there could have been even more completions because of what Tim had cleared. But I think there is a level of concern there. There always has to be when a player has had some big things. It's not just like he didn't make a catch. There's been some other things on top of that, and I think that's where coaching and teamwork and fellow teammates come in a little bit. But it depends on the individual. I think Tim's strong mentally. He's overcome a lot of things on the field and off the field in his life, and I don't think this is a very big thing right at this moment in time. And I got a lot of confidence in the guy just because he's so damn good. I mean, he is so damn good.
And we've seen the chemistry between Tim and Bo in the preseason. Luke, what are your thoughts on what you're seeing from Tim White?
Yeah, I'm pretty concerned. It's the kind of thing that can just get flipped. Mike and I were talking after the game, after the post game show, and I remember the times that like a drop or a mistake can just like really melt away quickly with one great catch. Like as just like in like your own psychology as a player. I remember within the same game for me, a mistake that I followed up with a big play of any kind, and like it really just helps you kind of bounce back. But it's been so many drops now, and so you're so far into this that I'm not sure what Tim is thinking and feeling, and it is tough. I didn't have many games without a catch that I started in, and it's a strange feeling. It's to not have one in a game where you're could have been targeted, or could have had 12 catches for all you knew before the game started, for what could have been. And so I'm concerned. I mean, that was in the third week in a row of really off-brand play from Tim. And there's the physical drop still. There's just the actual technique and sort of physical mistake of an actual dropped catch. And then, yes, but we also are seeing some miscommunications in routes, like you can see Bo kind of after the play giving like a thumb or a hand kind of saying like, I thought you were going to go this way type of gesture. Or sometimes he was hand on his chest saying, that was me. I know that you did the right thing and I was seeing it different. So I don't know what percentage of routes have actual reads at the top of a route for wide receivers, because it's not a ton of routes oftentimes, and I mean a true read. So a lot of plays for a wide receiver are going to have an option like if it's zone, sit in an area, or if it's man, keep running. That's like kind of baked into a lot of plays, and you always have to make that decision for a lot of routes. But then there's some routes that are like a true decision to make, like if it's this coverage, you're running a corner, and if it's this coverage, you're running a dig, like an actual route change based on what you see. And I don't know what they're experiencing, or I don't know what their playbook has in store, but whatever it is, however many of those decisions, it seems like a lot of them are being made differently by Bo and the receivers, not just Tim White, although Tim included. And so whatever those decisions are, it doesn't seem to be the level of sophistication that sort of matches where they are as far as like how much they've been able to get into this playbook together. So I don't know if it's a simplify it thing and simplify and let everybody play a little bit more free, or just rep it more is maybe another option. But somehow you've got to get the ball into Tim White's hands and help him get out of that slump. But it's not like they didn't try to do that, So it's a tough one.
Yeah,
Would you
so,
want to
so
run
Tim
a ball?
led the league in receiving last year, and you don't have to have Mike Daly's defensive IQ to know that the other teams are keying on him. Mike, are you seeing defenses play Tim White any differently this year?
No. The easy answer, no. And I think it's a little overstated on how often a defense will completely try to eliminate a guy, because in the CFL game there's so many different opportunities for that motion and people to move around that it's a lot of communication. It completely leaves other players out to dry if you're gonna, let's say, go double one receiver or put a low zone on them to get hands on them, but that's not really happening. It's not like Tim White's having to fight through two different presses and then work his way in behind a linebacker who's looking at him. He's had opportunities. It's not a situation where they're eliminating him from the game. He has opportunities at the ball. There are targets going his way. When the ball gets thrown his way, for the most part, it's a good decision. It's whether it's on target, whether Bo missed him, whether Tim ran the wrong route. The defenses aren't doing anything different, and if that does happen, you'll see that very rarely in the red zone or in some sort of pressure situation. In this sense, it's not happening against Tim this year.
I think you're right, Mike. It gets a little overstated. I can remember teams doing it with Speedy B a little bit, and I like how you said that in the scoring zone, like where like a true like double coverage. You know how like that. It's funny. That's not really like a defensive coordinator term, double coverage. That's like a TV football fan term. Like rarely To be perfectly honest with you, a few times I remember something strange happening to me on the field like that. Like, because maybe like a second down situation where they thought, hey, 70% of the throws here have gone to Tasker here. And like an actual bracket is maybe a better word for it, where like an in and out, two man players. And I remember Speedy B being like truly like double covered at times. But even that, it doesn't happen as much as you might think, because it causes such a hiccup to the rest of the defensive scheme. You're really putting the other 10 guys, if you take 2 on 1, you're putting the other 10 guys in a real bind. But guys shading places, like for instance, if with Tim White's speed, guys have to respect that a little bit. If they think there's a likelihood of Tim, they don't want to get burnt deep. No DB wants to get burnt deep over top. So if there's a real threat of that, they may have to play it different with a guy like Tim compared to a guy like myself. Like they maybe weren't as threatened, like in the deep route sense. But I agree. I don't think it's necessarily Tim. I don't think Tim's disruptions are coming from some sort of special scheme. It seems unlikely, and I think we got to help him from the Ticats need to empower him to be a playmaker again, however that looks.
Let me ask you this really quick.
Sorry, Mike. Yeah.
Let me ask you this really quick, because I saw it kind of come up a little bit at the end of that game with Saskatchewan when Bo Levi was driving the field. Is there a little pressure on him now to try to force the ball into Tim? How does he think, and does that happen? Because there's open players. Usually if you're looking for something in behind the linebackers and the linebacker takes away, and I'm thinking about the pick six right now specifically, when a linebacker sinks that far, most offensive plays are drawn up. Okay, if a linebacker or a low zone player is that deep, there's something right in front of them. Put it down there. Is there an emphasis from Bo?
I wonder if that's true. It'd be like a psychological thing to me. I don't know if that's in his headset, although maybe. There was definitely times where Tommy Condell would come right back to me or one of my receivers after he'd made a mistake, like a coaching strategy of like, I'm going to get my guy back in this game because I know he feels the way he feels right now. There could be that, but in Bo, in himself, I wonder. I mean, he certainly wants that target there, right? And that pick six, I think it was tipped by the Will linebacker, and then Jameer Thurman was the one who made the reception off the tip. And you're right, that gap between those linebackers was closing very, very, very quickly. I wonder. I almost would say I hope so. Like you kind of hope that Bo isn't at all feeling the opposite of this, which would be like, hey, I'm not sure I want to go. I want to throw the ball in that direction anymore. You kind of hope that Bo feels like what you're saying, Mike. Like I'm going to keep on forcing it there, or not forcing, but I'm going to keep on putting the ball to give him chances to make the catch.
He says that. I mean, he has said that, and he said it on the air and off the air. I'm going to keep going to him. Is there a chance, guys, that just give him the ball like on an end of round or something like that, or one of those little like the situation Tuck is playing in? He had some success sort of on that, either out of the backfield or whatever, and on a little where it's going to be open a little bit. Somebody's going to be closing on you in a hurry, but it's going to be open a little bit. But at least you've got the ball in some kind of space. Something like that rather than the normal pass route. Is there any way that can happen, just to get that feel of, hey, look at me in the open space, and him saying that to himself?
I would say yes, but I hate end around plays to wide receivers out of the backfield.
Yeah, I know, of course. Yeah. End around, that's just one thing. It could be something else.
No, I'm kidding. It surely is. I mean, I am not kidding that I always think they take so long to get the ball out of the backfield when you hand it off to a receiver running laterally.
And a lot of bad things can happen.
Teams do it very well, but or some teams do it very well, but it's got to be quick. But I think the better answer to your question, Steve, is yes. Like you give him, find a way to put the ball in his hands, but but here's the problem. It's not like he had zero receptions because he had zero targets in the game. No, meaning right. effectively they were trying to get the ball to him, and it didn't work for multiple reasons.
So Tim White's going to figure it out, but in the meantime, it's opened up some yardage for other players. Shamar Bridges is now 5th in the league in receiving. He's the Tiger Cats' leading receiver at the moment. He has a couple of touchdowns. Steve, you've seen a lot of rookie receivers come into the Tiger Cats. Are we seeing a star in the making in Shamar Bridges?
Yeah. At this point, I'd have to say yes. Now, it's early. But really, it's early in the sense of a 3-game CFL season, but we noticed them, all of us, the very first day of rookie camp. very first day, and we kept thinking, okay, this is gonna level out. This is gonna level out. It hasn't, and you see it in practice. And I think there's still some things a lot of big things he's got to learn. I think there's some sloppiness at times to his sloppiness is the wrong word. Just the lack of edge.
Well, he did have that early drop in the Calgary game, and he seemed to have gotten a lot better. It almost made him better, it seems.
Yeah, that's right, and he needed that kind of thing. And all of the steps that they've asked him to go through, and the first one was what's going to happen in even the black and gold game, where you're not really facing hitting, but you're getting guys squared up on you, and past that with flying colors. Then he has, he the first time he got belted in a real game, which was an exhibition game, and then it happened, as you say, he came back from a drop. All of those things, all of the steps have been there. I mean, I don't see the film, so I'm at least I don't see the coach's film, so you don't always know, and I wouldn't know half the time what I'm looking at, anyways. But I really think that he's got something there. I mean, it is really, and he's gaining confidence too. Remember, I mean, this, he comes out. Nobody knows him. I mean, nobody knew him. He had to prove himself. He has to continually prove himself, and he's got this determination. Like, he really is studying out there, and he's taking extra time on the gun to with the ball or those kinds of things. So he really. He's drinking in the knowledge, and I think he's got a chance here to really do something. He's got a bunch of other guys to help him with that too, and to learn from. Of course, there's only one ball to go around. That's the other thing. Maybe his next step of development is we're not throwing to you because other guys are getting open, but you better be ready to catch that big ball in the fourth quarter. And I don't know if that's a factor, Luke, Mike, but I think it can be. If you're not getting used all game, right?
Actually, in fact, my slot receiver or somebody who's waggling and is close to the quarterback for most of his plays, generally you've got a few more targets per game, right? Like I had more catches, less total yards often. So like you're kind of involved more so. You're also, like Mike mentioned earlier, you're adding into blocks a little bit more frequently, and you're kind of in the mix. Those X and Z receivers who are generally in a standard formation on the very outsides, closest to the either sidelines. It's not uncommon sometimes to go 2 quarters of a game or 3 quarters of a game and not have done anything. Like, you had a catch in the first quarter, and then you have 3 catches on a drive in the fourth quarter, and you've got to be able to physically and mentally like do that. So yeah, that's part of the game for those guys for sure.
Another receiver who's emerging, we talked about him last week on Ticats This Week with Luke Tasker, Mike Daly, Steve Milton, and RJ Broadhead, was Keandre Smith. And now he's made it 3 straight games with a touchdown. We're heading into game 4. It's kind of a little game within the game to watch, isn't it, Mike? Keep this streak going. 18-game season, that would be phenomenal if he got a touchdown in every game. But he seems like he has the potential to put a little string together, doesn't he?
Yeah, Luke said it perfectly. He's starting to understand the game a little bit more, and exactly what Luke used to do when he was playing. He would find those holes in the zones. He would know when to sit it down, like Luke was talking about. He knows how to just be a target for his quarterback and not get covered. He worked to the open space, and he's becoming that. And you saw it on his touchdown where in the playbook, that would have been a big post all the way to the other side of the field, and saw the high defender, and he shaved it off like a really deep dig, essentially, and Bo found him and threw that thing out there. The really cool thing about Keandre, and as I keep watching it, is we always talk about his competitiveness, and there's a lot of people in the CFL that are competitive, yes, but not on the level of him. And it's very apparent when you're in a locker room and you know who truly wants to win and be the best and who is just there and because they're athletic. And Keandre really looks like he wants to be the best, because there's times where Bo might be looking over to the boundary side and Keandre will be the second receiver on the field side. So not even in the look, unless Bo had super peripheral vision to be able to see him. But he'll be running his route and he'll beat a DB and you'll see him throw his hand up there. And he might not even be the read on the play, but he's like, hey, I'm open. I smoke this guy. Give me the ball. Right? And we've seen that time and time again where he just keeps getting open, and Bo will find him sometimes, but if he's not looking there, he won't find him. But Keandre wants the ball every chance he gets. And moving him inside, I think, was a great move for the Ticats because he is becoming that savvy player now.
And very important now, too.
He's getting open.
Because of the two other Canadians that they went out and deliberately got to play outside, and very important with the Canadian content here. Besides everything else he's doing, glad you mentioned it, Mike, because I thought everything you need to know about him as a football player was encapsulated in that touchdown. Every single thing. One of which is the intelligence for the game. Like, he seemed to be the only guy in the field that understood, beside the referee or the official who actually noticed nobody had touched him. Up he got, and then he fought. When he's had problems any problems in the past have usually been because of that competitiveness, not knowing necessarily when to go. This was the flip of that, knowing when to not go down. He just fought it and fought it and fought it, and I thought it was outstanding. And guys on the team mentioned a lot when he first came to the team that this guy's almost a little too confident, but they couldn't take their eyes sort of off of that. Like, it got to be a thing where guys would say, this guy's got an awful lot of confidence for a guy that just walked into this team. And he lives up to it. That's the other thing they would say to it. That was the corollary to it. He lives up to it. I think it's a very important thing. And again, as I say, partly because they've got a bit of an issue with Canadian injuries. And especially at wide receiver now with two down, right? So, and it's very important.
So I'm curious, Luke, because 3 games in a row, it'd be nice to see him get a touchdown in a 4th straight game. You never know how the game will play out. We'll find out on Sunday against Ottawa. But is that talked about in the offensive meetings? Do you talk to the quarterback about it? Like, hey, can we keep this streak going? Or is this just a statistical thing that broadcasters and fans will watch?
You feel it as the player. It builds confidence 100%. Like, you just really you get better when you get better because you're getting better. Not talked about in the sense of like, hey, Bo, can we do this thing again, or what's going to happen?
Although Luke, maybe Keandre is doing, hey, you get 4 in a row here, give me the ball.
He maybe he has a different style than I had, 100%. It's absolutely possible. I think it's inevitably, though. I think you'd be kidding yourself if you didn't believe that quarterbacks get very comfortable throwing touchdowns to some guys too, where they just kind of. They just think it's going to work, and they feel like it's going to work, and it happens that way. So it builds habits. You get better at scoring touchdowns, and you build confidence for sure.
He's in the perfect spot, Luke, just kind of like you were in the situation where if you're close to the end zone, let's say 5, 10, 15 yards away, the defense is going to play man-to-man, going to pressure you probably. That ball is coming out quick to a guy like that. Just the same way you caught most of your touchdowns from corners or slants, outs, just quick hitters when the defense is pressuring. So he has an opportunity to keep doing this.
Guys, we got to wrap this up. Ticats this week, we rattled off almost an hour. Great conversation again. Game on Sunday again at 7 o'clock. It's in Ottawa, so a road game for the Tiger Cats. They need a win against the Ottawa Redblacks, who are 1-1. Tiger Cats are 0-3. It's a big game in the East Division. Pre-game show on the Ticats Audio Network is at 6 o'clock with Mike Daly and Bubba O'Neill. And Luke Tasker and me will have the call at 7 o'clock. And Steve Milton will be around for Ticats Today. I'll be filling in for Steve Milton for a couple of days this week on Ticats Today as well. So we'll keep you updated on all the current happenings with the Tiger Cats. Luke Tasker, Steve Milton, Mike Daly. Great show on Ticats this week. I'm RJ Broadhead. Thanks so much for taking some time out to watch and listen.
This has been the Ticats This Week, built by Turkstra. Whatever your next home project is, build it better with Turkstra. Visit TurkstraLumber.com today. Like and follow the Ticats Audio Network on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast content, and get a deeper understanding of your Hamilton Tiger Cats.